Today we're gonna get started with a guest speaker, Peter, who'll talk about energy efficiency, renewable energy, and in building, and then talk briefly about a letter of intent for the Leahy Institute grant. The next kind of big project on our work plan to kick off is producing the first annual report on the state of housing in Jericho. So I think we can start thinking about what that's going to look like. Also, town meeting is only a couple months away. We've got a table reserved, so we need to think about what we want to be sharing there. Fair Housing Month is then the following month in April. And then we'll go through our usual liaison updates and other business and plan for our February agenda. Does anyone have any comments or changes on the agenda? Okay. I don't see any public to be heard. Peter, unless you've got something outside of the scope of what you're going to present that you want to share.
Nope, I'm all good.
And let's table approving the December minutes to our February meeting.
Oh, yeah. I forgot.
We're just going to smooth right on by that. So Peter, welcome. If you want to give a brief introduction to yourself. I don't know that we've all met, and take it away.
Yeah, I would be happy to. Thank you so much for having me here. So I made a slide for that. So about me, I'm a software engineer. I grew up in upstate New York, a couple hours south of here. You can actually see in the background that's taken on the front yard of the house I grew up in.
Where in upstate?
A little town called Argyle, near Lake George.
Oh,
Yes.
Hudson Falls.
Yes, I know it well. Welcome.
That's so unusual. I still have to get used to that. Sometimes people know about it. It has more cows than people, which is why my parents decided to go there. They're veterinarians. But yeah, so I'm a member of the Jericho Energy Task Force as of six or so months ago. And so a little bit of my background. So about a year ago, I sort of quit my job as a software engineer. And the goal was to de-burn out and take a break and have fun. And instead I started reading about climate, and that was a problem. I got pretty depressed and frustrated. But the silver lining, I found that action was the antidote, and that sort of helped things a lot. So I did a bunch over the past year. One of my projects was like a website to help neighbors connect over decarbonizing their houses. That sort of like never got really momentum. Another of my projects was sort of electrifying or decarbonizing my own house. So I installed my own mini split heat pump and a water heater. And it took a lot of learning, but it was possible. And I sort of wanted to see what I could do on a budget, and it came in under $3,000 once you take into effect the incentives. And I learned a lot along the way. I guess as I get into the presentation, please feel free to interrupt and ask questions that are like clarifying questions. I wouldn't want to use a technical term and then forget to explain it. But like for longer debate questions, I think we'll have time at the end. Yeah. So you guys, I think, are familiar with climate change at least a little bit. So we'll keep this brief. But here's one of my favorite charts. It's called warming stripes. It shows the temperature over the past 100 years. And if you go on their website, you can see much longer timeframes as well. But what I see in this is like, one, we've been clearly warming over the past 50 years. That's been a clear trend. You can look over at this chart on the left. You can see we've pretty much hit 1.2 degrees Celsius. So that's problematic in and of itself. But what this chart doesn't show is the tremendous momentum of climate change. So if we miraculously stopped burning fossil fuels around the entire world today, this graph would keep on going because we'd still have all the CO2 in the atmosphere acting as a blanket on the Earth. And so there is really a lot of urgency as to the time. For more context, Vermont law, we passed the Global Warming Solutions Act in 2020. And I said, like, look at our 1990s emissions. drop them by 40%, and that's your goal for what is now 6 years away. Our latest data was just from 4 years ago, and we just had a 7% drop. And just to get an idea of what this looks like, you can imagine 4 out of every 10 cars on the road being fully electric. You can imagine 4 out of 10 homes existing in Vermont being fully electric. We have a long way to go there. We're just 10% of new cars sold are fully electric, and I don't think we even have stats on housing. The other thing to keep in mind is that when we build houses, they have heating systems that last for 15 years or more. And so to like, even if they just lasted 7 years, we'd want 40% of our houses to be fully electric. They last longer, so that percentage should be more like 80%. And then I want to point to the Jericho town plan. So this just got passed. And it has some pretty clear objectives in one of our sections on building a connected community. So it says one of our objectives is that we build modern, cost-effective infrastructure, which provides, clean energy and reduces climate impact. And it also says, it goes on to say that we should promote the development and use of clean and renewable resources. So it seems like we have a fairly clear mandate to act here in the town of Jericho. But how? So we can take a look over and see other municipalities near and far that have done similar work. So this is a chart pulled from buildingdecarb.org. We can see over 100 areas in the US have either banned fossil fuels for heating air and water outright, or have put a limitation of some sort on it. These include our neighbors in like Burlington and South Burlington, Vermont. They include the entire state of New York, including like commercial and residential buildings, upstate and in the cities. Includes like little towns like Beacon, New York, which is one of the first, and they were just like a 13,000 person town. Not so different from Jericho. So there's a lot of precedent we can pull from, and obviously there's a lot of communities think that this sort of thing it's possible to put limitations on here, including Quebec, which says it goes even more extreme, but we can talk about that later if we want. I want to zoom in and talk about South Burlington here, about what the ordinance they passed. It's a little more than a year ago now. Their energy task force was doing a study on sort of making an overall climate plan, and they found that they said, well, actionable right now, we can update our zoning and our laws to say we're not going to do new buildings with fossil fuels. And so they presented that to the select board. The select board liked it and said, actually, you proposed to do this for air. Let's include water as well. That made sense. So that's what they did. I think wording is fairly important here. So for example, it doesn't specify specific technologies, but it just says that when you heat your home, you have to be able to do it with renewable energy. And furthermore, it doesn't prohibit fossil fuels. It doesn't say you can't put a natural gas or a wood stove in your house. You can do that as long as you are able to heat your home with renewables. So you can do both. And in fact, many installers encourage backup heating methods. The South Burlington roadmap or like ordinance has exceptions. If you can say this is going to be more expensive over the period of 25 years, like we'll grant you an exception. Nobody's asked. Nor has the town been in any legal trouble, in case that's the question. And they've gotten several new developments that are underway, affordable, and fully electric, which I'll show you in a second. But before I do, I want to zoom out a little bit and say, what is this technology? Heat pumps, funny name. But what they do is they have an outdoor unit, which is just shown in the picture here, actually generated by some AI, I guess. And there's an indoor unit. And so it takes heat from the cold outdoors and pumps it around and puts it into your house. Modern heat pumps installed, like the Mitsubishi, which is very common here in Vermont, have an average efficiency of around 300% over the course of a whole year. So for every unit of power required to run, it puts out 3 units of heat energy into the home. I had quotes done on my own house here in Jericho, just for one mini split unit, and found that like 2 or 3 quotes came in right around the $6,000 to $7,000 mark, with a 30% tax credit, bringing that price down to $4,000 or $5,000. Heat pumps can come in multiple shapes and sizes, though. This is a heat pump water heater. In fact, this is the one I installed. They have an even higher efficiency, up to 4x. And the way they work is they take heat from the air inside your house and put it into the water for your showers or dishwashing or whatever. If you're replacing something such as classic electric, like resistance electric or propane or whatever, these can pay back their own cost in as little as 2 to 3 years. They cost like $2,000, $3,000. But they're so efficient, you save a lot on your heating bill, on your water heating bills over the course of a few years. So yeah, I think they're great. The other thing is heat pumps are not a static thing. It's a rapidly changing field. And fortunately or unfortunately, the US is behind here. So if you look at Europe, they've been leaning into this technology first. The manufacturers release their products first in Europe. And so we can look over there and see what technology we're going to be getting in the coming 2 or 3, 4 years. The most significant is that modern refrigerants are around the corner. So we use R410A today, gets those numbers that I talked about in the previous slide. New refrigerants such as CO2 or propane or R32 bring that efficiency up even more to 400 or 500% efficiency. That's really amazing. That brings the cost down. And the US, I believe the Department of Energy has been running a prize program for bringing some of this high efficiency technology here in the United States. And they've been saying you should commercialize in 2024 to be eligible for this prize. So this technology is coming over. And then there's a third type of heat pump I'd like to talk about, especially for affordability reasons. There's something called a monoblock, which is like smashing together the other 2 types of heat pump I showed you. A monoblock heat pump lives outside. It takes heat from the air and puts it directly into water, and then pumps the water into your house where you heat with like radiant floors, or you use it to heat your showers. Now, these are really cool because you don't need to be an HVAC tech to install them. You don't need to work with refrigerant. Instead, you just need to be a plumber. And so they're much more friendly for DIY installs, or you don't need as skilled a workforce. And this chart down on the bottom here just shows like the HSPF2 rating. That's the level of efficiency, what that leverage is on your efficiency. And it's been going up year after year, significantly too. All good so far? Great. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about costs. So I think there's like 3 types of costs we can dive into, like 1, the construction cost, 2, the operating cost, and 3, the avoided cost of having to change your heating system later. And we have several studies we can draw on for this. So 1, for like more than 10 years, it's been cheaper in the American South to build a fully electric home than to build a fossil fuel home. This is because you can save costs on natural gas line hookups, running gas lines through the house, and other fossil fuel things. But what's less well known is that for the past, roughly 5 years, this is also true in colder zones. And this is because, as I said, heat pumps have been getting better. That means you need fewer of them for the home, and when you do have them, they cost less to operate. And so this is something that's now becoming applicable in colder climate zones. So this study was done by the Rocky Mountain Institute. They basically took a house and they said, what would it cost to equip it with fossil fuel appliances or fully electric ones? I recommend reading this chart from right to left, by the way, it's a little easier. So that's the upfront cost comparison, and they came out to about the same in Minnesota. They looked at greenhouse gas emissions. They found far less emissions in the fully electric home. And of course, in Vermont, this would be even a better ratio because we have a much cleaner grid than Minnesota does. And then they looked at the net present costs. So that's factoring in the operating costs in the future. And they found that those were better for a fully electric home in Minnesota. And I'll link out to the study and everything so you guys can dig into it. But there's another study too. This one was done by the New Buildings Institute. So this one I really loved. They went into a lot of detail and did over specific line items. But you can see that they're in climate zone 5A, so a little bit warmer than Vermont has historically been. And they found that there's actually savings from an all-electric home on the order of $7,000 to $8,000 versus fossil fuel one. There's less infrastructure for fossil fuels, and this translates to lower down payment cost and lower mortgage. Again, the study's available. I can link to it. But those two studies were both for single family homes, and I was wondering, what about bigger buildings? So I talked to a couple builders here in Jericho and surrounding areas, and they said that like generally the scale rule says that smaller homes are going to be the most expensive to heat per square foot, and that, if that makes sense, if you get bigger homes, what you have is a better ratio of living space to exterior walls. And so for apartment buildings, the price savings get even better. And they pointed me to a couple examples. So the first one was a retirement home called Elm Place in Milton, Vermont. They had two buildings, each 30 units, built a couple years apart. And the first one was built with fossil fuels for heating and water heating, and the second one fully electric. What they found is that that second one cost about 2% more up front, but then they'd earned that back within a couple of years of operating the building. And the second one is here we see that there's new construction coming in South Burlington since they passed their ordinance. There's several developments that are fully electric, and the one I have here is a BT Digger article from I think September 2023, and it shows that there's affordable housing being built in a fully electric way. And so these are like people that we can go and talk to find more information. So that's building affordability. It doesn't seem so scary. But what about operating? And so here's a chart. This is from the Energy Action Network. They're a Vermont nonprofit, and they did a study on prices. This is from 2023. So look top to bottom. This yellow line here is called electric resistance heating. This is what they did in the 70s, for example, just to like, or what an electric water heater does. That's not a heat pump. And it's essentially your toaster. It just turns electricity directly into heat. I should pause for a second and point out how to read this chart. You've got year over here. This left column says, how much do you spend per unit of thermal energy being put into your house? And then this right-hand side is just like the market prices for that fuel. And so you can see that electric resistance heating is just about the most expensive one you can get. There's a reason we stopped doing it after the 70s. But then you can see there's these three here, maroon, orange, and gray. Those are all fossil fuels. So kerosene, propane, and fuel oil. And the first thing that stands out to me is it's very volatile. The price can spike up within a couple of months. And then the second I see is they're pretty high. They're like the second most expensive way of heating your house. And then down here we can see this blue line, that's a heat pump, and not like an amazing heat pump either. This is just a typical average heat pump. And so we can see that that's pretty good price and far more stable. Below that we have this green line of wood chips, which I think we can pass by. They're not super common. This orange line, that's natural gas, or they call it fossil gas, but that's just their term. And so we can see that those are pretty close. This doesn't factor in the fact that a natural gas customer has to pay, $300 a year for just being hooked up as a customer. So, and like I said, the heat pumps, they're not using the best heat pump here either. So between those two, it pretty much comes out to a wash. And then we have commercial wood chips down here at the bottom. When I think about Jericho, I think about like there's kind of two types of people here. We'll call them Alice and Bob. And in this case, let's say Alice lives downtown in one of those like the affordable apartment units we just saw in South Burlington. She lives in an apartment. In this case, it's fully electrified, and she's comfortable without backup heat because in part, the grid is more reliable in this downtown area. There's fewer trees on fewer driveways. But also it's a downtown area and the utility is going to prioritize keeping the power on in this area. She's also close to neighbors and can easily get to them if she needs to. On the other hand, there's Bob, who lives in a very rural area in a single family home. His house is also primarily electrified, but to be a little more resilient, he has a wood stove on one end and a Generac whole house generator at the other. Now these add a little bit to house costs, probably $10,000 or so ballpark. So they add a little bit, but that gets rolled into the mortgage. And because he's saving potentially thousands of dollars a year by stepping away from, say, heating oil and going towards a heat pump for his fuel costs, he's actually still coming out ahead. But I think it's important to like look at these and understand how reliability comes to play. The other thing is, the last thing I want to say is like it's not all about affordability is not all about cost, but health I think plays no role here too. You don't need me to point out that like if you're healthy, you have more time to go building up your wealth. And the reverse is also true. If you're unhealthy, that can be both very costly to your time and your bank account. What has sort of hit the news a little more recently, but it's been known for a long time, is that nitrous oxides is one of the many things that are emitted when we burn things in the house. And this happens, despite our best efforts. Children that have a high correlation of childhood asthma in homes with gas stoves. And this is worse in modern buildings where they're more tightly sealed. So there's less fresh air replacing air that has, indoor air pollutants in it. And it's worse in smaller units where there's just less volume to dilute the pollutant. So what we have here is charts of sort of what acceptable levels are of nitrous oxides. It's around 100 parts per billion. And on the right, we see a little chart from someone who did an experiment in their own house and saw that when they cooked, they got a spike up to 200. And this particular point is close to home for me as one, I'm an asthmatic who's been living in houses with gas stoves my entire life and sort of never really thought about it too much. But then when we started looking, I found that it was correlated with, I was getting asthma when we used the stove, and I bought a nitrous oxide meter and found that my bedroom was spiking up to 600 parts per billion. So that was kind of close to home for me. I think that we're pretty close to the end here. So the question is like, how do we make a difference in Jericho? Sort of what's next? And I guess what could happen, the way this could play out is Jericho Energy Task Force would present to the Planning Commission and say, hey, we think this is a good idea. The Planning Commission would talk about it and then eventually present to the Select Board for approval. So this is where I would ask you guys for your approval and your support in this process along the way. Yeah, that's all I have. Looking for questions if you guys have any.
Thank you, Peter. If you want to stop sharing, unless someone's got specific questions about slides, and I'll open it up to the committee. Anyone have some initial questions for Peter?
Peter, what is your specific proposal?
Sorry, what was that? What's my specific proposal?
Yeah.
What I would like to see is something along the lines of what we've seen Burlington and South Burlington propose. We have limited enforcement mechanisms here in Jericho, but what we can do is update our zoning to say we would only permit new construction buildings to be approved if they follow similar rules and say you have to be able to heat that home with renewable energy.
So I was looking down at Home Depot and I saw a 30-inch gas range for like $500 and these new electric ranges, which are, I want to say it's something like induction heating. These things are like $1,400. The pots you need to buy are extremely expensive too. And, being from the low income view, it seems that it would add a lot of cost for low income people if they were forced to go to these new expensive electric stoves with the expensive pots and all.
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess that there's two answers here, which I think are both good ones. One is that there's federal incentives that are rolling out this year. State by state is determining the timeline, but homeowners can get up to $840 off of an induction or an electric stove. And so one, you can go electric, which is cheaper, but induction is more fun. But then two, you get almost $1,000 off that, bringing the price comparable. And then second, like I would love to talk to you guys about retrofitting homes, but that's a whole nother ball of wax. when you look at this holistically for new home construction, you're still saving money, because although that new stove may have an added cost, you're still saving significantly over other parts of like not needing an oil tank or not needing to hook up a natural gas line. So you still come up ahead.
So but your proposal is about heating, not about cooking.
This is also true. The proposal would only affect air and water, and people could still put in whatever stove they want, although they may or may not choose to.
I have a question about both the air and the water. People are gonna say and push back. I have a heat pump, and we're basically on solar, so we're pretty much electric 100% here. But the heat pump won't do the job on its own necessarily in the winter. As you know, it reduces, efficiency goes down as the outside temperatures go down. So thus far, we haven't dared to get rid of our backup oil stove. We haven't turned it on yet this year, but it's only January. And we heat mostly with wood stoves with heat pump on the milder days, actually. So there is a combination that you can come up with, but in the end, you're still going to need that backup heat for those really cold days. Or am I not understanding the technology right?
No, you're absolutely right. There is also layers of nuance to it. So one, you take a heat pump, as temperatures go down, it will both reduce in efficiency and it will reduce in heat output. That being said, a modern cold climate heat pump will put out full heat all the way down to -5 degrees Fahrenheit. Of course, they get less efficient while that happens, so the cost goes up. But if you average that over the course of the year, you're still coming out ahead, as we saw in those charts. Those were like the chart of heat pump cost. I could go back to it, but that was taken over the course of a whole year. The other thing is that, yes, backup is encouraged. There's lots of forms. One of the simplest forms is just electric resistance heating backups, where it's just like, that's back to the toaster analogy, and just it's easy to put those auxiliary heat strips as part of a heat pump install, or have a wood stove, or they make hybrid natural gas systems. None of those things would be banned under an ordinance saying you should be able to heat your home. I believe the way that South Burlington does it is they say 85% of the way with renewable energy. And for what it's worth, I'm running on my heat pump right now and have been for several days, and it's doing the job.
Right. This is just for and the second question about water is, we looked into a heat pump water heater, and apart from, there being challenges with retrofitting, as you mentioned, it actually takes heat out of the house in the winter. The heat that it uses to heat the water is taken out of the home, which was not something that we really were looking to do. So I don't know that I would be super in favor of adding water to this would be something that would prevent me from being enthusiastic about the proposal if water is added into that.
Is it due to cost concerns or comfort or something else?
It's due to comfort concerns. In old drafty houses like ours, or like many of the affordable houses that exist, and even in new constructions, if you have a small house with a basement and you put the water heater anywhere that's in some kind of proximity to the living space, you're going to basically draw heat off the living space. So I mean, I think the way around it would be to heat your water some other way, but I'm not sure the heat pump water heater is the solution here.
Yeah, that's another really good question. And like, so one of the preferred techniques for that, and although it's lesser known, is you can get what's called a split system water heater. And that will take heat from the outdoors to heat your water. And they're a little bit more expensive, but they do avoid taking heat from indoors. I do want to say, like, one, it's for new homes you're not going to have the same drafty issue, and that's just sort of, we're talking about just new homes here. But I have seen this work in old homes. I was talking to a friend who's retired in Richmond, and she just sort of has it in the basement, which is cold anyway. And then she installed a little shunt in her floor. And so she takes extra heat from the wood stove occasionally and sends it down to the basement when it gets too cold. So there's like either you pay more or you do something a little bit more creative. But I think there's ways to use these in old homes as well.
So it sounds like you have to be really careful about a all or nothing type approach, that these things can potentially help modernize and potentially save money, but you really need the fossil fuel backup, especially in Vermont. I mean, tonight we're supposed to get up to 65-mile-an-hour winds. So if we lose electricity, you know, I've my 5-gallon buckets filled, my toilet walks over. But I mean, we live in a much more precarious situation out by the mountains. So it seems like what you're saying really should be, hey, we can modernize, we can save some money, but we need the other backup, you know, so we don't end up freezing to death or having problems in the winter. Is that what you're saying, or am I putting words in your mouth?
No, that's right. And I think most people would agree, and most professionals would agree that like it's a little bit cutting edge to go fully electric with no backup. And for most people's comfort level, they'd want a backup method, of which there are several. Whether you're heating your home with a wood stove, or you have like that Generac, you know, propane fueled generator that turns on automatically, or whether you have a car with a battery that feeds back into your house. There's a lot of good ways to do it. And like it's one of those things where there's several different solutions, and there's not like one that I'm going to be like, everybody really likes this one. Because I think it's based on whose home it is, they'll have their preferred way of getting that extra security and reliability.
So we have a couple different combinations. We have an apartment in our house that has an old first, you know, I don't want to say 5-year-old heat pump, and it's good to about 0. And then the backup there is a regular electric resistance heater. And then in the house, we have heat pumps. We primarily heat with wood pellets. But our heat pump is fine heating the house down to 5 or 10 below. But pellets, we use the pellet stove.
That makes sense.
You know, a little bit more in the winter. You know, a pellet stove, they're 40-pound bags. Not everybody wants to haul them around.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I guess the question just comes down to, you know, in some respects, you're taking away people's freedom to do what's best for them. I do think things are headed in a direction in which doing, you know, the kind of the right thing is the better thing, you know, in terms of technology.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things of whether we internalize the true cost of our actions.
Well, the real impact, I mean, I think an even bigger impact is the size of your house. You know, I believe it's, you know, do I think a 600 square foot house that's well insulated, that's heated with a gas heater is, you know, better than an enormous house that's heated with electric? Yeah, I do.
I would encourage thinking like along multiple time frames at once. Because like for this year, it's quite likely.
Oh, I just also want to say, sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. We have a heat pump water heater in an unheated basement. And
Nice.
you know, I think it gets as cold. It might get down to 50 in the basement down there, and we certainly have plenty of hot water. I don't know how it affects the efficiency, but all of the heating is above the basement.
I think to your point about house sizes, we can look ahead a little bit. Most states have something called a renewable portfolio standard, which says how clean is our energy going to be. And Vermont's pretty cutting edge with 100%, but like if you want to be a little more critical about it, you should probably look at all of New England because we're in the same it's called an ISO, but same grid. But what's happening over the course of the next 10 and 15 years is all our neighboring states, their renewable portfolio standards is going up and up and up. I think Maine's at 100% by 2030. New York has a 20-year plan. So what will happen is over the course of the lifetime of the appliances we're putting in buildings today, the grid's going to get cleaner and cleaner until at some point that'll flip, and it'll be better to have us. I mean, we can talk about embodied carbon of construction materials. That's another question. But in terms of heating a big space off renewables, it won't matter as much in a few over the course of a decade or more.
In
But
your
I think-
calculations, did you figure in the ongoing connection charges? And I bring this up to use my own house as an example. We've got solar. We've had solar for about 12 years. We added more solar this spring to generate more electricity than we ever have before. We've got a Tesla Powerwall. I've got a outdoor whole house heat pump because we had forced hot air in the house. And we've got the hybrid hot water heater. We still get hit every month with the equivalent of about $50 to be connected to Green Mountain Power and Vermont Gas. And the heat pump is set so that it won't work very effectively below about 32 degrees. So your system sounds really great in the lab and in the ideal situation, but I'm wondering about in the real world, does it work? And more importantly, because we're the Affordable Housing Committee, as a committee that's devoted to finding housing that's affordable to a wide range of the population, including those in the lower income levels, I spent a god-awful amount of money to try and give the big middle finger to my utility companies. And the extra cost that would add to a low-cost house is quite likely to put it outside of reach. So how do you balance the desire and the good intentions of zero emission or low emission with the need to provide housing for people who don't make scads of money?
That's a good question. I think let me try and break it down and please like correct me if I go off course here. But I think we kind of want to look at the biggest cost centers and take them out one by one. I think what I'm seeing in the technology trends here is that we are at the point where you actually can build a fully electric house and have it come out ahead.
No, just to put it clearly,
Mhm.
my parents had a fully electric house up in Fletcher back in the 60s, baseboard heat, and it
Yeah.
worked just wonderfully. We're moving away from saying we want that anymore. Now we're going back to it, but we've had the ability to have a fully electric house for a long, long time.
Yes. I mean, it's fully electric is not enough. Electric and affordable is necessary. And what we're seeing is that this technology, you take the price of electricity and then you divide it by 4, and that's the rate you're paying to heat your house. Comparing electric resistance in the 70s, that's what was in my house too, to a heat pump, which can get 4 times as much energy from the in terms of heat based off what was put in. And so what wasn't practical then is practical now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the technologies are very different, and we have we have a heat pump that works down well below zero, but to me it's making decisions for people. I mean, we have rules in our town in certain places that you're not allowed to use an aluminum storm door, and I like we're trying to push back against some of that stuff, and I think I mean, I'm all in favor of promoting it. We're trying to get people out of cars, into a decent place. And I'm a little reluctant to put, personally. And I have the Tesla Power. I have all those toys. I have all that stuff. I have all my knobs, and I enjoy running it. And I have my app that tells me every instant how many kilowatts I'm using, and I'm into all that stuff. But I've spent a lot of money you know, getting it set up. I do believe in a small, tight house that, you know, that all electric is the way, you know, is the way to go. And I think that people, you know, will go in that direction. I'm reluctant to
Yeah.
to have the ego to imagine that it's the best thing for everybody.
I think there's a lot. Like I come here with the technicals and like the philosophy side. Like I neither am nor want to be an authority on sort of what tone we want to strike there. Um, I guess I'll just say this is that there's another side, especially when it comes to affordable housing, is it's not an individual choosing the home they want and then building it because they want a door of a certain way. It's someone who has no choice, is looking for something cheap and existing on the market and is buying it. And everyone's philosophies are different, but mine as a renter would be one, I don't want to pay high operating cost. I don't want to have to pay for propane or oil. I want something cheap. And then two, like personally, I don't want to feel guilty when I turn up the thermostat. I want to go in a home that feels good to be in emotionally. And I think that we're in a place to say like the buildings developed in Jericho should be friendly towards renters who don't have that agency to design their own home.
But at
And
the
to
same time,
work
though,
with
we
their
have to make sure
landlord.
they can afford to live in those houses. And if the cost of putting all the energy saving institutions in there and everything else we're talking about increases their rent by 20 or 30%, it becomes unaffordable for many people. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We want all of the efficiencies. What we're looking for is a way to make that happen at a scale where people who are doing 80% of the median area income can still afford to buy a house in Jericho. And that's the challenge. Chuck is mentioning as well, it's expensive to do this. Costs a lot more to put in the cutting edge technology. So is there a middle ground? And can you talk about the middle ground that we as Affordable Housing Committee can say, this is the direction we think we want to go to meet our objective of housing people?
Well, I guess the question for you is like, what could I tell you or share with you? What data could I share to show you that it's not more expensive to go fully electric?
If it's not more expensive, then that's what people will do. The question is,
I wish that was true, but it's not. It's often true, but often there's like a lot of fear. There's a big education gap. People don't know this technology. People may have not even heard of it. There's a lot of other things at play.
Could I ask, you mentioned talking with developers and doing some outreach in that area.
Mhm.
What have you heard from them? So in South Burlington, clearly developers who are building there are being forced to solve this problem and figure it out. It seems like they're not having a problem, maybe they are. And also some single family, the kind of development that we often see in Jericho is, a nine single family homes on a plot of land. And so that kind of level of development. What are developers saying about making this switch? And are they only doing it when they're forced to? Are some of them seeing the benefit in it? Are they seeing these cost differences that we're worried about?
Yeah, good questions, and I have some firsthand and some secondhand. Um, I guess I'll start with secondhand stuff because I know there's several developments that have been going on in South Burlington, and what I can say there's a range. Like some developers go fully electric, some developers put in electric with backup. Some are high end, and some are affordable housing. But I haven't like taken that next step of going in and interviewing them. I honestly wanted to talk to you guys first to get the good questions. But like talking to them and finding, their balance sheet. I did talk to local builders. I talked to Chuck Reese and Chris West, so Jericho and Heinsberg. They had most experience going one step further, which is to your point, Eric, the cutting edge. they have experience with passive homes. And so those homes are fully like beyond the current code, many more inches of insulation designed to keep heating costs to zero. And they say that those will bring homes up in cost by 5 or 10%. So that's beyond what I'm talking about here. That's like a whole nother level of more insulation and bringing operating costs down. And then those two developers that I happened to talk to didn't have firsthand data in what I'm talking about here, which is just electrification without other code changes, because that's not where they had experience. But they did point me to the Elm Place in Milton, which I mentioned on an earlier slide, at being just 2% more expensive.
I just want to say I really appreciate you talking to us about this. I think we're kind of a group that is different from what you're gonna find when you go to town meeting and or even the planning commission and try to get anybody to pass something that says a new homes should be 100% electric. But we do give some pushback that you're probably gonna hear again and again. And you did show us data showing that the cost of building these new construction is actually not going to be any higher. You did show us the data for that, and that's probably a good thing to lead with. I think that what we're coming from is our experiences of adapting older houses with newer technologies and running into expenses or limitations. So I think that also you really may want to kind of think about in an area like Jericho that's quite rural and somewhat unreliable, and has a lot of variety of housing needs, and very, very, very low percentage of renters. So speaking to the rental, needs isn't necessarily very applicable to Jericho. So it may make more sense to not, go for like 100% as your proposal kind of would ideally want 100% renewable, but kind of have some kind of intermediate compromise there to make it more make it seem a little less drastic to the folks that are going to have to end up voting on this.
I think there's a kind of a strong, I agree with that. And I think there's also a strong, people really worry about, electricity going out. And we have, we have places in town where electricity goes out a lot for a long time.
Yeah, my house included.
Yeah, I think people, like Eric, I got the Tesla Powerwalls and, we can go a day and
I got the candles on the table right now and the water waiting.
Yeah, I can run my pellet stove, off a generator, easily. I mean, have taken steps, but I'm conscious of the fact that, the power goes out. Again, if I were to build a house, I would basically expect to be heating with electric, personally. And I do feel like, that's the direction that's going in.
Yeah, I think like,
And I think our mindset also, at least mine, is a little bit more on we have seen how regulation has reduced choices and increased costs. And how the town has used various, responsible goals and shaped them in a way that ends up being, really restrictive, in terms of housing options. So I think you're kind of facing that temperament on our part. It's like ordinarily I would want to, I'd say, yeah, right on, let's go for it. But this experience in really thinking about housing, and the regulation that has been twisted, and the various values that have been twisted into justifying exclusion.
Yeah, I wouldn't want that either. I want to, I would want everyone to be looking at this and looking for flaws of that nature.
So I have a question, quick question. I had this nice, brilliant young lady come by this summer, and we talked about solar panels for my house. And she was saying, she told me two things. She said that 50% of the electric generation is lost in transmission from, the point where it's generated to where it comes to our house. Maybe Chuck or some of you guys have heard the similar thing. And she also said that in Vermont, I'm on Vermont Electric Co-op, that the costs are going up 8% per year, and they expect for the next several years that will happen. So again, Chuck, you're electric Chuck here, so maybe you know more about this than I do. But if this is the case, if costs are going up, did you calculate the increase of costs of the electricity potentially in what you'd save by going electric in a house? And do you recognize these numbers I gave you? Maybe you've got better information.
I think she got the 50% a little bit wrong. What she might have been saying is that 50% of the cost of your electric bill is transmission and 50% is the electricity itself.
Okay.
As opposed to a loss. And that, if she was doing her job, she was explaining to you that the electric companies are sort of upset about the fact that people who go solar aren't paying the transmission half of the cost to participate, to enjoy the opportunity to be a net metering customer. And she might have gotten it, kind of quite a little bit wrong.
Or I misunderstood. Could have been it.
Yeah. Wayne, these things are so much more efficient than fossil fuels. Vermont Electric is probably in a different situation than Green Mountain Power. Green Mountain Power's, I don't think, is going up that fast.
Yeah.
But these things are so, and we used to burn 1,800 gallons of fuel oil and 5 cords of wood. And now we burn 4 tons of pellets, which is like 4 cords of wood, no fossil fuels. And our electric bill, the amount that we've used on the energy efficiency efforts we've made in other electric areas have covered the cost of adding the heat pumps.
Okay.
I mean, they're really, I don't know how you can say something that's 300 or 400% efficient. I don't know how you do that, but
That's
these new heat pumps are really remarkable.
And just to add to that, I just looked up the price history, and so you can see over the past 3 years, electric rates have gone up 6%. So, and that mirrors what I think a number lurking around somewhere in my head is around 2% a year that you expect to see for electricity prices, which I'm not, and it would basically be akin to giving investment advice if you're claiming you know what electricity is going to go. But what I can say is that it's regulated.
It's more predictable
fossil
than the
fuel
fossil
is
fuel
not.
price.
What's that, Chuck? I didn't catch
It's
that.
more predictable.
More predictable. Okay. And so you're saying that, Peter, that it's 6% per year is what you saw?
2% per year.
2%. Oh, okay.
6% over 3 years.
Oh, okay.
But I do think the Vermont Electric Co-op is in a different place.
Oh, okay.
I've got 2 questions. One, maybe Eric, you may know this as well. Is this something that is already an incentive in our regulations in terms of energy efficient building and is that a potential compromise area?
I think it's a recommendation. I don't believe there is something specific. The Newtown plan encourages energy efficiency, doesn't mandate it, and I don't know what's in any kind of, Jericho doesn't have any specific building codes that I know of that would say you must have X, Y, or Z in it.
No, but I'm thinking about maybe with PUDs, if there's an incentive structure. I think that there's a kind of energy efficiency bonus or something, but I haven't looked at it in a really long time. Anyway, that may be an area to look to see if this is covered under those incentives, and if it's not, that's certainly I would think a thing to consider. My other question is, are you here as a representative of the Jericho Energy Task Force? And is this something that the task force is taking up and fighting, or is this my neighbor Peter?
I'm not representing the task force at this point.
Okay. And how does what kinds of questions have you got from the task force, knowing that Catherine McMains is a member of the Energy Task Force?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it mostly it mirrors a lot what you guys have said, honestly. It's like, first, affordability, not wanting to make housing harder in Jericho, as this has been an ongoing issue. You know, reliability of the electric grid. And there's a little bit of like, do people want this?
Yeah, and the town's gonna need to make some decisions on housing and zoning that a lot of people don't like. And to pile on another one.
I hope that you can advocate for the new town maintenance facility to be
Yeah, it
To
should
be,
done with clean energy.
yeah.
Yeah, put a solar panel on the roof.
Put a solar panel on the roof, hook up a heat pump.
They've already got a solar farm right there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, we have clean energy already, but in I think more than just my opinion, but we need to stop emitting. Because there's no way we can't pull CO2 out of the atmosphere.
Well,
in
how is it gonna
volumes
be heated?
required. The town garage is currently planned. I don't know.
I don't know, but this is so I guess where my brain is going is thinking about, and this is kind of something that we as a housing committee have been doing a lot of too, thinking about all of the different places you can make an impact. One of them would be, potentially passing an ordinance like the one that you're suggesting. But there may be other areas where you can have big impacts. And one of them is, we know this big town build is coming up, and there's going to be lots of public hearings about it, and lots of opportunity for feedback and for pushing, which is both a way for you to get your message out to the broader community, but also potentially have an impact on a new structure that's happening. There may be some big developments happening at the flats and Riverside. If development happens there, I would hook you up with the folks at Wisdom House
I talked to them.
and start. Okay, good. And start,
They're very supportive of this.
I'm sure, paying attention to those efforts there. Looking closely at the energy bonuses and kind of incentives or places for incentives within our regulatory our zoning regs, maybe another place. And I do think, I think that this is a good example of a group of folks who really are really interested in and care about building and development, who some of us have a lot of learning to do. As you were saying, as you well know, this is a new thing that not many people have a lot of experience with. And so making that switch or asking folks to make that switch is a tricky one. I want to invite you back to talk about refurbing old homes and what kinds of opportunities, if there are any, how costly is that? Do you see, are you able to make back that cost in a reasonable amount of time? Is that something that, in addition to weatherization, is that something that can help make staying in Jericho more affordable to people?
Or serious.
Oh no, you all look live and moving to me. Oh, no,
Something
Peter
I
froze.
would say, SJ, to you is that, my house may be a little more unique. I think only about 6,000 houses in Vermont have forced hot air, which I put in because I've got asthma and I wanted filtration on it. If you don't have forced hot air, you've got baseboard or guess typically it'd be baseboard, steam or electric heat, you can get a mini split, which is the one that generally what Peter was showing earlier. They are probably a lot more efficient than a whole house system. But for any of the larger installations that are going to go on, where you're going to have air conditioning, I suspect you'll find that the mini splits where you have that unit sitting outside your house on the side of the house will be less popular than a bigger one you pop up on the roof that heats the whole house.
Eric, is a mini split, the circulation from a mini split worse for someone with asthma?
Well, it doesn't filter the air.
It what?
Doesn't filter the air.
So someone with respiratory issues would be less inclined to use a heat pump for heat.
No, someone
A
who
mini
has
split.
who has lung issues and wants to have their air and the dust picked up out of it and pollen would want it to run through a filter before it gets there. So in my house, I've got a forced hot air furnace in the basement. When it turns on, it sucks all the inside air in through the intake ducts, runs it through the filter, heats it, and pumps it back out into the rest of the house. When I had it installed, I put in deliberately a condenser so that I could have air conditioning added in. Turned out to be AC and heat pump instead, but it now takes the interior house air, sucks it into the basement, which heats the basement. So my forced hybrid hot water heater doesn't really cool the basement down as much. It's got hot air coming in, runs it through the filter and sends it back out.
Okay, but so I understand the system. I think I understand the system you've got, but would someone with respiratory issues be less likely to want a mini split?
That's what I've heard. I think a lot of installers say you can do a mini split or you can do a centrally ducted heat pump if you want to maximize your air filtration, just like Eric is saying. And so there's different types of heat pumps. And if your home has ducts, you might well choose to put in a heat pump that uses the ducts or those ducts.
I think it could be, as Esther is saying, it's, promoting the concept. I mean, I'm an enthusiast. Find the enthusiasts out there and have, just get more, more people and, just kind of aware and engaged. And rather than starting with a regulation.
All right, it is 8:05. I'll offer one last opportunity for question or comment, and then
I did want to just get back to you. Well, now that my internet's back, on retrofits. This is sort of like an idea that's like bouncing around for when I have more time, but you can look up the South Whidbey, Washington, and basically they raised $1 million in private funding, I think mostly from a university, to retrofit existing homes. And they said, okay, this is going to be split about $10,000 for each of 100 homes. And that's going to be like a price match when someone goes to retrofit. Because like retrofitting is a lot harder. It's a lot more expensive. The houses weren't designed for it originally, so you're facing that barrier. A lot of people want it, but then there's just a big cost barrier for retrofit that isn't there in new construction homes. And so like, I'm kind of hoping that like, okay, we can get momentum here, sort of stop the bleeding, so to say, on new construction, and then focus on retrofits. But I haven't delved too deeply into that.
Well, thank you, Peter. I encourage you to, be loud, and really glad you're here in Jericho and starting to make a little noise.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me.
did you say, Peter, that you're a
Thanks,
renter?
Peter.
That I'm
Are
a
you
renter?
currently renting in Jericho?
No, I live here.
Oh, okay.
Or you can live here and be a
one of-
renter.
I
Yeah.
thought he said he was a renter.
Oh, I did too.
At one point, I said if I was a renter.
Oh, okay.
Like I didn't,
Oh,
because
okay.
I've rented for most of my life, and had so many conversations with landlords about like, can I put solar on the roof? No. Can I, change a heat source? No. Like, it's really hard to have any control at all as a renter.
Yeah.
Peter,
Well,
I feel
thank
your pain. I lived in California for 7 years and rented out there and had landlords telling me I couldn't put screen doors on the house. Yeah, that's what that's like.
Yikes. That's painful.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. Hopefully, you don't lose power tonight.
Yeah. Hey,
I
there's
got through the
something for
important
all of
stuff.
us.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome to stick around, but feel free to get on with the rest of your night.
Have a good night. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
All right, so I'm moving on to item number 5. At our last meeting, Wendy talked about potentially submitting a letter of intent to for a Leahy Institute grant about kind of centered on the work that we were talking about with HOAs and trying to untangle that mess. Some folks in town were already working on some letters, and so that idea, and Eric, please interrupt me at any point, got kind of rolled into a separate letter of intent that was being put together that was really kind of aimed at ways of leveraging existing housing stock to increase number of units and number of more affordable units in town. I think, is that a relatively good summary, Eric?
That
No?
was the intention. I had a conversation with John at one of the events we went to. And essentially they and the town attorney felt that it was inappropriate for the town to be mandating legal contracts on HOAs. So from what I understand, they did not push that forward with the Leahy Foundation.
Okay. Well, either way, it's a whatever it was that they submitted is housing relevant. So they're supposed to hear back in the next week or two, and if they got a green light to actually, so this is a letter of intent. This isn't actually an application. This is a like elevator pitch to say, hey, this is my idea. Is this something you guys might be interested in funding? If the answer is yes, then an actual application gets put together. So if they got the green light to actually put in an application, I'll find out what the letter of intent actually said, and make sure that we've got a seat at the table for writing an application for a project that that's got affordable housing at the table.
So, so SJ, if I can just clarify, so and Eric also, so the intent of the letter of intent was to how to leverage existing housing stock to achieve more housing. So that's kind of the general concept of it, right?
Yeah, and so that means things like ADUs. It
Yeah.
means taking large farmhomes and splitting them into multifamily homes.
Mhm.
Identifying a big empty warehouse that could be used, that could be turned into housing, that kind of thing. I think, again, I'm saying this not having seen the letter of intent, so.
Okay, but that's kind of is that true, Eric? That's kind of the general direction of it, right?
Yeah. What it's not addressing is the piece that we had been looking at where homeowners associations prohibit having accessory units within your house or other types of auxiliary businesses of various sorts. That was something the town said, we don't feel comfortable doing this, so not going to happen.
Yeah, because there is a lot of
when you say the
established law
town,
on HOAs. Go ahead, sorry, Chuck.
Eric, when you say the town, you mean John Abbott or the select board?
Probably
Claudine.
mostly John Abbott and the town attorney.
And I think that what they really reacted to was the potential of writing a template. And so I want to be very clear that I don't think that this means we should stop that work and stop kind of pulling on that string.
Right.
But they meaning Claudine, the town attorney, sorry, and thus John Abbott, are very resistant to the idea of providing a template. Which honestly, I'm not sure that we were, well, sure, we had batted around the idea of writing one. I wondered if one existed. But so just to be clear that that's what spooked them, and I don't think that means that we should stop advocating for more inclusive HOAs.
Or developing a template. I mean, you know, if we think a template is the right thing, we should do that, and we should make that case.
Yeah.
I think that
Mhm.
what we were looking to contribute was, basically suggestions for HOA, for developers, of what they should not include in their HOAs, to not be exclusionary. And then beyond suggestions, kind of moving toward town rules that would be a list of things that people cannot include in their HOA bylaws. And that is still different from a template, but I think it's what we wanted. And I'm wondering, I keep not really hearing any really legal answers. These are kind of non-answers from the, what really is the legal situation with this? I'm still unclear about that, and maybe I'm just too dumb to do the homework on my own, but I really haven't figured it out yet.
Rodrigo, if you're too dumb, we're all too dumb.
Well, I did some looking at this a little bit, and apparently there's a huge body of settled law relating to HOAs, and it's all very general, but it says that the job of the HOA is to protect the value of the homeowner's property. So it's very, very wide open. And so that's why I think that's what would have spooked the town attorney, is if we start saying, well, you can't do this, you can't do that. I think, like you said, we can come up with some kind of, obviously years ago, some idiot on the other side of the state had a convent or a covenant that you couldn't sell the house to a Jewish person. Obviously, that's illegal. But as far as other things, like, remember I talked about the other month there about somebody building a fence that was too high and blocking someone's view. So it's just all these things that you have a piece of property, and it's the activity. What activity am I going to do that you would suspect can reduce the value of your property? And that's really what it comes down to. But it's a huge body of settled law. So that's why I think the attorney's scared. It's like, okay, there's a huge thing here, so we just want to be careful. But, like you said, there's obvious things, activities, I think Eric put it last month.
I think to Frederica's point, though, there is some current ambiguity with how the recent legislation that has been passed and the intentions and the work that has been coming out of Montpelier, how that interacts with HOAs and their ability to circumnavigate these laws that are coming down from Montpelier. And that I don't believe is settled, which is why we are not able to get a clear answer.
Yeah, no, I think that the attorneys want to know exactly what they said, the laws say, and that. So yeah, it's just a really complex thing, I think. And I think we can definitely, like Chuck and Frederica say, try to put forth some ideas. But again, I think, the attorney and John will be a little reticent. But, again, keep pushing it, get it out there,
Chuck?
Well, this is one of the differences between a town administrator and a town manager. We don't have to listen to the town administrator on this.
Yeah.
Go to the select board. 2 points. One is, I've just been a little bit lost in this new housing law, and I did find a pretty good summary on the Department of Housing and Community Development page. And it says under covenants and deed restrictions that now any covenants or restrictions established after July 1, 2023 are invalid if they establish minimum dwelling unit size. And this is like a really short summary, and there may be more things other than dwelling size,
There you
kind of
go.
in the in the actual law. The second thing is, I mean, what I envision is Eric goes to his neighbors and SJ goes to her neighbors, and we say, hey, do you know that this is in here? Let's get rid of this. And if an HOA were to say, yeah, we want to fix this, if we had something to give them, which would be something to go on, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
On the HOAs that we have read are all templates. I mean, there is a template, right? A restrictive HOA template, and we see the same language over and over again in the HOA agreements that we see. I think if we had something, I mean, it's entirely voluntary, and you could give to Rolling Hills if you want to fix what you've got here. We've thought about it. Here's our ideas.
Yeah.
Let me just write this down. What was this that you were quoting from again?
This is the housing bill was Act 47, which was passed last year, and that was the big housing one that made duplexes legal everywhere and that kind of stuff. And Section 20, covenants and deed restrictions, amends 27 VSA 545, blah, 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 to invalidate any deed restrictions or covenants established after July 1, 2023. So the bill was passed in, May. If they establish minimum dwelling unit size or require more than one parking space per unit, or more than 1.5 parking spaces for duplexes and multi-unit dwellings in areas not served by water and sewer. So this was just 3 lines summarizing what I think is a longer section of the bill.
Okay, I just wanted to get the numbers down so when I make the when I write the summary here that it's Act 47.
47, section.
Okay. Good. Okay, good.
All
I
right,
think people,
so
Eric, you were surprised when you saw your HOA, or maybe you maybe knew what was there, but when you read it, your heart sunk.
Yeah, I thought we might have been too early, but yeah, on that subject, I don't know if any of you have looked at the submission in front of the DRB for the Mills River Park, or the Mills River development there by the general store, the old Tetro property. No? Well, on one of their bylaws, section 14.3 prohibits the conversion of a garage into anything other than a garage. No living space. There's another section in there that prohibits any kind of temporary housing, tents, camper vans, or anything else on any lot. You're allowed to do whatever you want to do. Those are the way the rules work.
Are
But
there minimum housing sizes?
no, I didn't see any of those.
So this was for because I wasn't caught up with the DRB, so I must have not seen this. But this didn't come to a meeting yet, right? Because I certainly haven't seen it in a meeting.
No, it has come to a meeting already. The DRB has had an initial view.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And that's where you said Mills. Where is this?
It's where the Jericho market is.
Where the
Riverside.
the Riverside thing. Oh,
Yeah.
I thought that was just a continuation. At the last meeting. So but yeah, no, I know that there's some documents with that's where you got it from. Is there a covenant there?
sorry, is it Mills River Park or is it the Riverside Tetro development? Like, is it the development that's,
It's the 355 Route 15. sorry, 366 Route 15, the Sawmill Site Development.
Oh, so is that the Wisdom House people then? No?
No, it's Tetro's property.
Oh,
If
okay.
you
which
go
is-
to where the store is, the supermarket there, you know, where the old sawmill was? That
Yeah,
long,
supermarket near where like the old middle school or whatever is there, right?
yeah, the Union Bank and all that.
Okay, yeah.
The
it's right,
old sawmill itself, where the lumber was turned
right.
into.
It's right near the bus stop.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you're
Um,
right, Frederica, that was a continuation, and they didn't.
It was December
They didn't
13th
have
was
that
the,
meeting.
was
Yeah,
the date.
yeah, but see the DRB site, I'm just looking at it now, it's true, there's all these documents there, and that's where you found it, in those documents, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's a declaration of a planned community is the one.
I see, declaration of a planned community, and then there's declaration of condominium,
Yeah, it's one of
Yeah.
the two of those that was in.
okay,
And
All
the
right.
building they're going to be renovating is basically the building that held the old sawmill.
Oh,
So
that
it's
big
one
metal
piece of property
building?
that's still there. And they're
Okay.
putting in, I think it's 10 or 12 units. Combination of 1 and 2 bedrooms.
So I just have a dumb question. So if I had a garage and I wanted to make it into a housing unit, then how would that come into all these concepts of efficiency and insulation? Because my garage is uninsulated, it's just made with 2x4s. So,
A lot of mother-in-law apartments are on top of garages, right? So if you can
I see.
build something on top of the garage, you can insulate it really well, and you can you can call it an ADU or and I don't think I think that's the one thing that at some point we verified, that you can't say no to an ADU, right?
Yeah, okay.
But maybe this is different in a planned community, whatever that is. To look at that.
All right, I
Well,
want to
I'm
move
thinking-
us, I want to move us along, because this is not part of tonight's agenda.
Sorry, SJ, it's also fascinating.
No, I know.
I know.
I know. All right, so I want to take what time is it? 8:24. I want to take 5 or 10 minutes to just talk about and maybe recruit somebody who might want to work on building the first annual report on the state of housing in Jericho. So this would be the baseline report that then everything gets compared against. This is a report that would be the metrics for our housing target resolution. So things like how many houses did we build this year, and what does that look like compared to the last 10 years? How many of them were affordable? How many of them were multifamily units? Blah blah blah. So we need to go through the target resolution and find all of the kinds of data points that we want to be able to report out. And then also think about this document in terms of, this is a report that we'll give to the Planning Commission, that we'll give to the Select Board, and that I'm hoping, will be either included in a town report, or we can certainly circulate at a town meeting. But this is a way for us to kind of both report out stats and also package a message. And so I want to be thoughtful and deliberate about what we put in it. And again, thinking forward, the next year, I think that the Planning Commission, is looking to do, they got the bylaw modernization grant. We could talk about this in other business, but there will be some zoning changes in the next year. And so, that means that in 2025, maybe we'll be able to look and see if we can see an impact of those zoning changes, because we'll have this data to kind of compare back to. So happy to talk about that in some detail now, or if you want to put that kind of in the back of your noggin, noodle on it for a little bit. And if somebody is interested in working with me to compile that, that would be great.
I'd be happy to. I'm retired now, so I have time. And I'm sure Frederica and Chuck and Eric could be indispensable too if they're interested. But I
Yeah,
definitely volunteer to help.
I have
But I
something else
think-
I want to work on.
I think we should think about, you know, we can do just kind of a state of housing report, and it could be dry and full of stats, and that's fine. But I think we want to think about how, as a communication tool, both as communicating with our neighbors, but also communicating with the planning commission and with the select board, to make sure that we're using this to our full advantage.
Yeah, I envision something really simple, you know. Just-
What's the source of the data? Do we, short of going on realestate.com or something like that, do you just go to the administrator, the zoning administrator?
I think that a lot of it is yeah, gonna come from Linda and Chris. And so because of that, I want to be really clear about what I'm asking for and only need to ask once. Both to be respectful of their time and also just that's the best way I have found to get that kind of information. But then also, yeah, there are some publicly available sources. Yeah.
I mean, if you envision this as like one poster, one piece of paper, and basically there's one page out of the housing resolution that basically has the objectives, right?
Yep.
I mean, I'm game for working on that. I'm not interested in working on a lengthy writing exercise, but if it's
No.
just, okay, how do we come up with something that everybody understands, basically a box score for housing.
So,
If that's where you're headed, I'd be happy to work on it.
but
Cool.
I think I'm hearing two things. One is like Chuck saying the box score, but then did you also want to have something to say, here's where we've been, here's where we're going, and then you can measure that in the future?
That's in the town plan.
Well,
I think there'll be some way to get a happy medium to provide some
agree.
context around these numbers. And I also think that this is the first of 5, probably 10, that will build out. And so I think that it needs to be brief, and it needs to Chuck's point, it needs to be kind of brief, and it needs to be easy to digest. But you're right, Wayne, and that I do think that there needs to be some kind of context around these numbers, particularly for future reports where we're saying, hey, we've seen an increase in this.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that last year, Planning Commission updated the regs around multifamilies, and look, we see 4 duplexes have gone in. So yes to both.
Okay, so there was some work that you did with Phil Newbeck, I remember, about 2-3 years ago, where you guys looked at, well, all right, didn't you look at like how many apartments and then how many houses would be considered affordable in Jericho? But I think it might have been before COVID, so as a baseline, there might be some issues there. But yeah, because I think you want to say, here's where we are, here's the new regulation. And like Chuck says, there's the ball scores, but then there's the other thing I think that you want that provide the context to the background, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Phil and I were looking at kind of naturally occurring affordable housing that already existed in Jericho. Where was it? What did it look like? Can we protect it? Was it, at risk of being
Gentrified.
expanded? Yeah. Okay. So that moves us into tabling at town meeting. So we have a table at town meeting again this year. It would be really awesome if we have this report ready for town meeting. I think it would be really awesome if we took the document that Stacy, the work that Stacy started on the HOA. You know, do you have an HOA covenant? Here's what to look for. Here's maybe something to get that conversation going. I've got a bunch of the fair housing literature and materials that I just kind of bring everywhere with me because it's important. I don't need to push it off. But what do we want to use that table for this year? What do we want to communicate to our neighbors about or ask our neighbors about?
This
Well,
town
I'm game for doing it. It was fun last year. I think SJ, you were quite firm about putting off recommendations on zoning changes last summer, and I feel like now we can do it, and I think it'd be great. Our experience agonizing over little words here or there. We put out a great 5-page recommendation, a lot of which really didn't stick. And I think that I think we can put together kind of a platform on zoning changes that we know is then going to get massaged by the planning commission. But I feel like we need to get something done and almost as a platform and present that at the table, with a handout. Just very, whatever the 10 changes that we think are important. I mean, the planning commission will do the comprehensive piece, but like, what are the major changes that we think are really essential?
And you see those as being kind of similar to the work that we've already done? Or
Yeah.
are you thinking something new?
No, I think it's kind of similar. It's,
Yeah.
it's triplexes, fourplexes in the 10-acre zone. It's PUDs that are truly rewarded for building smaller units. It's I think the planning commission is going to sweat the boundaries on expanding the village. We can just say that it needs to be expanded.
Okay.
I have a question about that's related to that. You mentioned that there's a grant for modernization, bylaw modernization. Is that timeline at all something that is that going to start before town meeting? And
Yeah, I
if
was gonna
yeah.
talk about that in liaison updates, but we can
Because that
touch
kind of
on it now.
influences, we don't want to it doesn't make sense for us to, present our thoughts on zoning if the rest of the town is going in a completely different direction with this. So I don't know what the content of that's going to be and what the method of that's going to be, if they're, so I'd be interested in hearing more about that.
I'm a little lost. Bylaws of what? Like how
Apparently
The zoning.
apparently there's already, like what I heard, you should probably just speak to it, but there is an effort to modernize the zoning laws, to change the zoning rules that is now coming up, right? Is that what you were?
It's mostly going
Yeah,
to be around the
Eric.
village centers.
So this
course.
is the thing. So
The
there's
little Lego
bylaw-
villages.
The bylaw modernization grant provides money for us for the planning commission and Linda to get support in redoing zoning. And their focus is on character-based zoning, number one. And then in updating zoning to incentivize and reduce obstacles to low and moderate income housing in village centers. Those are the focuses of this year's efforts that will be funded by the bylaw modernization grant. At the next planning commission meeting, I think Linda will kind of present an overview of what what the scope of work is for moving forward. But the expectation is that work happens this year and those changes get made this year. Now and Eric, you were in the room, so you'll have a better sense of this. The other thing that's on the Planning Commission work plan is to also look at updating zoning outside of village centers to incentivize and reduce obstacles to low and moderate income housing. That does not appear to be a priority for this year.
Well, let's make it one.
I'm not sure. I can't speak to why those things can't happen in tandem, even if one is paid for and done with the consultant, and then the other is a subcommittee of planning commission members and with our input if they want it. Is that your sense, Eric?
Yes, in a broad brush, the consensus on the planning commission was that the grant is strictly for village centers, not for outside of the village centers. And because the village centers have denser anticipated population, more housing and all of those, that is the area where the state has said the town needs to focus all of its work and its development, make that easier to develop in those centers. The areas outside have more restrictions in terms of the environmental conditions around it, the terrain and so on for what can go there. So the planning commission said, we're going to take care of the village centers. That's what the grant is for. Once that is done, we'll look and see how much of that we can adapt to the other parts of the town. That will probably start somewhere around the end of Q3.
Do you think so? It looked like it was you, Heidi, and Wendy. Does that sound right? Okay.
Yep.
When is Q3?
That would start in July.
Thank you. Means nothing to me. Okay.
Yeah, again, we have to meet the deadlines for completing the grant on the Village Town Center bylaw modifications. So if we do something different than that, it's going to cause, I guess, problems.
Because you
I don't like that. I don't see why two subcommittees can't be doing different work at the same time.
Yeah, we're an advocacy.
But I understand.
We're an advocacy organization. We need to push. This is ridiculous. I mean, it's illegal in 70% of Jericho to build a triplex.
I know. Okay. Yes.
But let me just. So to Eric's point, is it that we're collecting this money now, so we're legally bound that this is the direction we have to go because we're receiving the money, the funds?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why that project is happening. It's happening on this timeline. That is what David is hired to work on in addition to Linda and the Planning Commission. Yes. They also will be doing other work at the same time. That's not the only thing the Planning Commission is going to focus on, which is where I'm like, all right, Q3, but really, like, we could start looking at these things. That said, I don't know if Frederica, that helps you think about, I'm bringing us back to town meeting. That helps you think about, kind of advertising or publicizing our broad recommendations during town meeting at the table.
There's nothing that stops the housing committee from saying these are things we are advocating for. So
I think people are going to be like, so what have you done? What are you doing? So any recommendations we might be putting out, or maybe highlighting things that we've been working on already, because I think that's a huge question that I get a lot of the times. Like, so what are you even doing?
Yeah, when I did the farmers market that one day, you know, after talking to a few people there, it occurred to me that one thing that I would like to do is put up a sign that says, "What does affordable housing mean to you?" Basically, what is the definition for people, and what does it mean to them? Because I think that there's a lot of education we could do around what affordable housing really is, who it applies to, and the help people find themselves in the circle that is affordable housing. You know, because most people, when you talk to them, may think of affordable housing really as basically what's known as Section 8 housing or something like that. And while that is a part of it, that, you know, it's a much bigger umbrella. So that's something that I think would be really useful. That said, I am on service that week, so I will be stuck in the hospital from sunup to sundown. But that's something I would suggest doing.
This is the second Tuesday, right, in March,
This is March
12th?
5th.
March 5th, I just looked it up.
It's the first Tuesday. Okay.
Yes, March 5th.
It's always the first Tuesday.
I knew it was always something.
It's a Tuesday and it's the same Tuesday, but which
It's
Tuesday?
the last day of vacation for the kids.
Yep.
Yep. We'll be on
Yep.
an airplane.
You're
Hopefully.
on an airport. That's a good question. Chuck, you're around?
I can be
You wanna
around
hang
you.
out with me all day? All right.
Yeah, you're right.
Wayne, Eric, Wayne, you're around?
I'll be on an airplane.
You'll be on an airplane. Sure. It's Jay.
This will be the last year that
Okay.
I'm forced to take vacation when everybody else is. My wife's
Ooh, is
retiring
that
from
your
the
wife
school system.
retiring?
That's right. That's right.
Nice, nice.
Woo-hoo.
A week after from now on, low airfare.
Mhm.
I've been retired for 5 weeks now, Eric. I highly recommend it.
I didn't say I was retiring.
Oh, okay, okay.
All right, so next agenda item, Fair Housing Month is the month of April. I, at the very last minute last year, tried to get a community art project off the ground around fair housing to celebrate Fair Housing Month. And because it was last minute, I couldn't pull everything together in time. So if it's something that we want to do, we need to start working on it now and need someone to help me. Basically, Fair Housing Month is in April. And one of the activities that they do is a community art project where basically there's some kind of prompt that's like, what does community mean to you? Or what is an inclusive community? Or stuff like that. And it's a lot of kids, but it can be anybody doing artwork that follows that prompt. And it can be independent work, it could be some guided work. I know a couple of artists who were interested in maybe guiding one or two art making events that people could come to, maybe at Jericho, Allen Bean. And then the idea would be to have a couple of those events. It's a way for the Affordable Housing Committee to interact with the public, to talk about fair housing, just to get the town talking about housing in a nice feel-good way. And then the art that is produced at those gatherings could then be hung in the exhibit space in Town Hall for April, which is Fair Housing Month. The exhibit space in the Town Hall, if you're not familiar, is that committee room that we all meet in. And every time a new exhibit goes up, there's a welcome reception. And so I can imagine as a parent, if my kids did some artwork like that awesome koala that's behind me, did some artwork about housing and community, how exciting would it be to get invited to an art reception at the town hall? And it might just be a nice community outreach program for us, in addition to lifting up issues around fair housing. But it will take effort. And so I'm asking, is this something that the committee would like to do? Is this something that someone on the committee would like to help me with? and potentially join up with somebody from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee as well.
I know we started doing this last year, and I'm wondering what you think the biggest obstacles were, or like what do we need to be thinking about? You know, was it space, time, like
The biggest obstacle last year was timing. So like everybody was absolutely on board and excited to do it. And all of the spaces were Jericho, Allen Bean couldn't do it because we didn't give them enough heads up. The library was already booked, and so it was that kind of thing.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I wonder if like we've probably talked about this too, like if the schools would even be willing to do like one art class or something with that theme.
Mm-hmm. Is it something that you want to try to make happen, Stacy? Not alone. Is this-
Yeah, no, I was gonna say I don't want to head anything up right now, but
Yeah.
happy to make a few phone calls or
Okay. As a committee, is this something that we're happy to have our names associated with and is a good opportunity for outreach and talking about fair housing, or is this not something that the committee is interested in?
I feel like we have other things that we can be more effective on. But I don't want to discourage anybody from doing it.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what Chuck is. I think we have other things we can do. So, yeah. If you want to do it, go for it.
For me, it's a timing thing. I was just looking at my schedule. My schedule looks horrible March and April. There's 1 week of vacation in there that I won't be around, and the rest of the time they're working me 4 times as hard to make up for that. So
I think that I'm a little ambivalent. Taking on one more project is not really the greatest thing. On the other hand, the reason I'm bringing it up again is because I do think that community outreach and building relationships and people knowing us and that question about what do you guys even do, this is a way to get at another demographic that maybe doesn't show up to town meeting, to get our faces in front of them so that they know that we exist, and an opportunity for us to talk about some housing things. At the very least, it means that later on, if we've got some big YIMBY campaign happening, or we're advertising something else at the farmers market and really pushing for some development to go in or whatever, then we have some connection with folks.
I think the way people can get to know us is if we really are a lot more focused about what we want the town to do and really be advocating for positions that may be controversial, but that we can back up and that we can defend. I think the HOAs is one. I feel like the zoning changes is another. I feel like, really define positions. And I was very proud of the thing we did for the town plan, but that really wasn't an outreach thing. It was a communication between us and the planning commission and the select board. And we were contributing to someone else's work. We were working on someone else's schedule, and we weren't advocating for our thing. And I feel like just some really clear, I think people want to know, why is housing so expensive in Jericho? Well, we can tell you why,
Yeah.
And I think we ought to be, really clear. I mean, I'm waiting for other business, but I've really researched the history of developing wastewater systems in Jericho, and we're farther away than we've ever been. We have been very close before and didn't get it done. And we're following into the same old pattern, and it's been going on for 50 years. And under other business, I was going to give you the history of wastewater in Jericho. but
So let's move on
you know, we
then.
need to
So
get
I'm
behind that.
hearing,
We need to say, okay, it's 50 years is long enough. And who's pissed off that this study is taking forever?
Well, I'm
And
wondering if like for Fair Housing Month instead, we could put something out on Front Porch Forum saying like, here's what we're working on. Like, please come to a meeting and like learn more about
this is
it.
what the town needs to do.
okay, so I'm gonna say, no, we're not gonna do anything for Fair Housing Month. I'm hearing that we need to be more focused and deliberate about communicating the work that we've already done and already have planned. So for liaison updates, Eric, did you hear anything about wastewater feasibility at the last planning commission meeting and or any other updates from planning commission?
Wastewater feasibility study was supposed to have been done at this point almost 4 months ago. It is not done. I think what Susan said last time, or what Linda said, was that we really are not we're probably not going to see that until probably late March if we're lucky. So
Do you know
I'm
why?
disappointed in that.
Do you know why it's taking so long? I mean, this is just the first phase of the study.
Second phase,
Oh, thank you. Not the final phase.
not the final phase. I think what was taking so long, one, apparently the lead contractor was ill for a couple of weeks or something, and that put it aside. But the other part is before they published the results, they felt it necessary to talk to all of the landowners whose terrain, whose soils had been deemed suitable as use for a wastewater treatment facility or basically leach fields, before they put it out so it wouldn't blindside anybody. Probably a good idea, just in case someone would be really, really angry about that. But that's been the most cited reason for the delay. Keep your eyes out. Maybe it'll come before March, but that's what I heard. And
Okay.
no estimates on what the treatment facility would actually cost.
But why would it take so long to contact them? Because I mean, if somebody sent me an email or a telephone call, I mean, wouldn't they respond and just say, I mean, do they have to negotiate with them to get permission to put their property in there? Is that what would be taking time?
I don't believe they are trying to get commitments from anybody that they will allow their land to be used that way. I do believe they are trying to make all of the landowners whose property might be subject to or designated as a potential site to not be shocked when they see it and to not immediately try and put the stops on it before they have any other details.
Okay, so if Chuck called me and said, Wayne, your property is prime property, and I said, take a hike, then they would say, okay, you can't, we're not going to put your property in there, or they just say, hey, we told you, and your property is going to be in this report. How is that?
I think they'd probably, I don't know, I'm not party to that. If
Okay,
I were doing it,
okay.
I would try to convince you. I say, Wayne, look, we're
Yeah,
gonna take up a couple of acres of your property that you can't develop anyway, because you're in a 3-acre
yeah,
lot, you've already got it, so blah, 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 blah.
I
okay,
mean, they haven't even presented the options and selected a thing to move forward with. Like, this is all still, is that right? I mean,
No,
this
I
is,
did
weren't they
see,
gonna supply like 3 to 6 potential paths that the select board was gonna have to kind of pick from?
I think they will be at that point.
Hmm,
Here's the locations that seem to be the best. I do recall seeing, and I don't remember if it was sent to me by someone or if it was on one of the sites that Linda sent over, a map that had all of the suitable soils in the 3 village centers overlaid on the property boundary lines. And there's a fair amount of it. but there's also an awful lot of soil that's not suitable.
That
Right.
reminds me of what they showed a year ago at town meeting, right?
Yep.
It might be that's what it was.
Yeah, feel like we've seen that map. Okay,
The soils haven't changed in the last year. No,
Eight-
Probably
that's
in the last
geologic
couple
time.
of 10,000 years.
So,
it's 8:57, Chuck, if you want to give like a
sure.
2 minute.
Right. So Jericho had a wastewater plan, design, budget, and permits for a wastewater system in Riverside, a joint wastewater system with Underhill. And when it came time to really move ahead, Jericho pulled out. And the reason, and the select board handed it off to the planning commission, who said it would cause too much development in the village center. I then found another one in 1997 when the town contracted for a wastewater study for Jericho Center, the commercial district, and Jericho Village, and got plans, budgets, locations, customer numbers, hookup costs for each area, with a budget. The select board got the study, handed it off to an ad hoc committee. It never made it back to the select board agenda. The subsequent town plans, I don't have the years exactly, but it was, the 2 or 3 after 1997. They happened in pretty rapid fashion, like 2004, 2006. And then 2011, 2004, it said implement the wastewater plan. 2006, I'm not sure I have the years right. It said implement the wastewater plan. Then 2011, it said, that study's outdated. We need to do another one. Then in the next town plan, 2014, it said, well, we have the study from 1997, but it's outdated. We need to do another one. So then the select board waited 8 years and now have started this one, which isn't done yet, but have already handed it off to a committee. So when I look at this history, I have to think that we're farther away than we were in 1997. They also did a town survey in 1997 in which a plurality of the people supported, going ahead with wastewater systems. And what strikes me is how every year we wait, it gets harder to build one of these because you have that many more houses and that much more land that is occupied by people that have new systems. There are many, many people in Jericho Center that have new systems. The survey that the contractor, the consultant gave me in the village center was, would you like to hook up to a new system? A lot of people said yes. And, Linda and others are sort of relying on that as being a signal that people want to sign up. What they didn't say was in 1997, hookup was $18,000.
Wow.
You know what? It was a lot. Okay. It was something on that order. Okay. And they figured the amortized cost was something like $1,500 a year would be the cost that would amortize the hookup. They didn't ask that of us, and I feel like a lot of people would have said, no, I just built a system. I have a new system that's 10 years old. I have, and a lot of my neighbors do, so that we need to be putting together a business strategy. This is not just a technical problem. It's how do we bring on a bunch of new customers when these systems come online, because not that many people are going to sign up for them. This is not just an engineering problem. It's a business problem. The flaw, I thought,
I'm going to stop you, Chuck. I'm
okay,
with you.
well, anyway,
It's 9:01.
There is nothing that has happened that indicates that anything is more likely to happen now than in the past. Okay, we're following the same pattern. And we need to become an advocacy organization and really be advocating with the select board. What's absolutely unfair is the idea that we're restricting where people can live because we're going to build infrastructure. Okay. if we're not going to build it, we need to say we're not going to build it, and we need to zone and plan the town, kind of in a different direction. But to say that we're going to have it and restrict people based on something that, we really aren't going to ever do, is really kind of patently unfair. So I'm ready to take the select board, at their word. They need to push ahead, and we need to insist upon it. I mean, this is
I don't know
it's been going on for 50 years.
if anyone's been attending or watching select board meetings these last couple of months, but I'm losing hope. What little hope I had. that this
But
is
we
gonna
now
happen.
know, okay, sorry, we have one more point. We now know how fast the town can move when it accepts something as a priority, okay? Watch the town garage, okay? That's what you do when something's a priority. If it's not a priority, you order studies, you don't care where they're done, and you hand it off to a committee before you even get the study back. And that's
A priority and a legal liability, equal priority, but yes. Okay, so any other liaison? I think DRB got
No, I gotta look at the DRB thing some more. I kind of,
that's fine. I feel like I lived a whole lifetime in the last holiday cycle. Anything conservation? Yeah, go ahead.
The meeting's tomorrow night, so I can,
Okay.
yeah.
DRB is also tomorrow night.
Okay. Anything on the calendar?
No, it's not.
Is Tetro coming tomorrow night? No?
I don't know. I haven't looked at the agenda yet.
Okay, sorry. In terms of select board staff, just FYI, the fiscal year 2025 budget is pretty much done. It's been drafted, and so if you're interested, discussions are ongoing about that. Part of one of the things that's in that budget is an increase to the staffing budget to accommodate the potential hire of a new staff member, depending on the results of the organizational assessment that they did, which was basically we're not going to think about town manager, we're not going to think about expanding the select board, but we will take a look at our planning and administrative offices and see if there's a place where we can where we could use an additional staff member.
They did ask the critical question. The critical question is, what do we need for staffing to implement the town plan that we've committed to? If you
I
look,
think that what
is
they want to do is kind of a study of that. They want to do like a survey, right, of what the needs are, is what I
Well,
got.
on that topic, the planning commission last week went through, I think there's 13 items that were listed by us as priorities. And every member of the planning commission has adopted one or two or more of those priorities as something that our responsibility is to shepherd it through the process to make something happen.
who's got wastewater?
Yeah.
I don't remember. No. If you wanted to look through the or listen through the hour and 45 minutes of the session, I'm sure you'd have it highlighted for you. Or you
the
could wait
natural-
until next Tuesday, when we'll have the review of all that.
natural
I just
resource
have one
overlay
quick
update is almost
question.
done.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please.
No, go ahead.
Just one really quick question. So how can this DRB be reviewing this development at the old sawmill if there's no wastewater plan? I mean, what are these guys doing for wastewater there?
So just to say, that is not on the agenda for tomorrow. Not that answers your question, but it's just what I just looked at.
I mean, that's on the Tetro folks to have a wastewater plan.
The school has offered to work with them on a joint system.
So would they pay some money to expand the school system to accommodate them? Is that the idea?
I think the idea is if I can no longer speak for the school district, but I believe the school district is saying, if we can help you, we will. And we've got a bunch of land.
Okay,
And at the same time, we'll take a look at what our needs are and maybe a joint system, you know,
I
would,
see. Okay,
would work. So at this point, it's really up to the developer to come to the school
okay,
district with a proposal.
interesting.
That
Thank
is
you.
my understanding on it as
But
well.
that's an example of a customer that will be taken off the board.
Hmm,
Okay.
right,
It's like, okay, these big developments all around Jericho Center are now occupying, big houses on big lots with new systems, and they're not going to need a system for 30 or 40 years.
Hmm.
And all those are customers, potential customers that are lost to the system. And the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be, to do.
Well, Chuck, on your point earlier, just to circle back on that, I have a very good friend who's on Route 15 in the wastewater treatment district, or in the area where we're going to have it. Put a new septic in 4 years ago, $15,000-$20,000. He's not going to pay another 20 to. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So
Two other just quick updates, and then we'll adjourn 15 minutes late. Sorry, everybody. One, the Rivers property, there's just little things. Anytime I hear something, I quickly write it down. So there was some Act 250 something or other that was open. That is finally now closed, which means that they can actually do something. The fire department can actually do something with the property. Their plan is to hopefully subdivide off the house that's on that land and sell that, hopefully by the end of the year. And then they'll be ready to have conversations about what to do next with the land. The other update I wanted to share is that the DEI committee went in front of the select board and requested the select board add 2 articles to for floor vote on town meeting day, requesting 1, that the town budget be voted on by Australian ballot, and 2, that all public questions be voted on by Australian ballot. The select board did that, and so at town meeting, we'll have a floor vote about whether or not to move both of those or just one of those to Australian ballot. We can talk about that more at the next meeting or offline. I just wanted to make you aware. And then lastly, the DEI committee, along with MMUUF, is doing a Lead with Love event at the barn on Route 15 on Sunday, January 14th. And I'll send out information about that just so that you're aware of it if you're interested and want to come. Any other business or things that you want to make sure are on the February agenda? Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn. No one wants to adjourn?
I'll
You're
motion
the
to
one
adjourn.
that's
So much
pushing it.
fun.
Thanks, Stacy. Do I have a second?
second,
Thanks, Eric. All those in favor?
Aye.
I thank you, everybody, so much. I apologize for running late tonight.
lots to cover. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Night,
Happy
everybody.
New Year.